Hey everybody, welcome back. Thanks for tuning in. Going to change the head gasket on this Farmall M. If you saw the last couple of videos, it wasn't running quite right and we were getting quite a bit of coolant into the crankcase. So I've diagnosed it down to a head gasket, at least that's what I hope it is. We're going to take the head off, get a look at the gasket, and we'll also get a look at the top of the pistons and the cylinders, and we'll also get a better look at the valves and the valve seats. So the first step to this whole process is just draining the coolant. And whoever mixed this antifreeze went really heavy on the water, because it's definitely not like a 50-50 mix. This tractor did come from Texas, maybe that's why. You know, we really don't need to drain all the coolant out necessarily, because for a head gasket we just need to drain it below the level of the head. But I'm going to let most of it drain out because I want to put a more concentrated mix of antifreeze in here the next time we fill it up. Well, I've got about 3 gallons of coolant out so far, and I want to show you guys something here. I'm not sure if this is going to translate on camera, but there's a lot of silver flake in this coolant, which means that somebody in the past has put in that stop leak product. There's actually quite a bit of it. Can you see it sparkling there on top? So that's pretty good evidence that somebody knew about this problem before, either the previous owner or the guy before him. So I was going to drain all the coolant out anyway, but especially now we want to get it all out. The hood on this Farmall M is pretty easy to get off. You just have to remove the exhaust stack and the top of the air intake. And then there's one hook on each corner of the hood, 4 in total. You just undo those hooks and then you lift the hood right off. We can now move the water temperature probe. Let's remove this wire also from the back of the alternator just to get it out of the way. So this piece here, I'm just going to disconnect this whole thing from the head and just lift the head straight up. That way we don't have to disconnect any of this stuff here. Then there's a fitting right there that needs to be removed, and a fitting right there that needs to be removed, but this one won't pull out because it's connected to the top of the governor right here. It goes from here up to the fitting, and you can't, you know, it doesn't have any play in it. So we'll take out these 2 screws and take the plate off, and hopefully that'll allow us to get this tube out of the way. Let me show you what I saw over here real quick. Remember we tested for vacuum leaks around the manifolds? Well, see that big black spot right there? That is evidence of a blown or damaged exhaust manifold gasket. So we'll get that fixed as well while we got this all apart. It also looks like we've got an oil rail, for lack of a better description. It goes from here all the way to the other side, then back into the head. And it looks like we're gonna need to remove that so we can get the rocker arm assembly off, because it's above them right now. Ouch! Knuckle buster. So now what's left? We have this support bar right here. It's its own piece. And then we have to either remove this bracket or remove the stuff that's attached to this bracket, because the bracket is fastened to the head. And then, I don't know if we can get the head off around this steering shaft. It'd be nice if I didn't have to take that out also. I think we've got enough room to lift the head up underneath this and get it out, but we definitely have to take this bar off and that bracket. Now let's get the manifolds off. When I went to get the socket for the nuts in here, I noticed that the stud right here doesn't have a nut on it. So there's supposed to be 6, and we've only got 5 with nuts on them. So I wonder why that is. I don't know. These are probably going to be on here pretty good. I need to remove this air intake down pipe to get to that other one. And these two I need to go get Big Bertha for us. I'll be right back. All right, I got the down pipe off. Oh boy, that nut's stripped. That's not good. Well, I don't like doing this, but I'm going to. I went with a smaller size socket because it's pretty badly stripped, and we're just going to hammer it on there. And hopefully we can get it to crack loose. Well, this manifold is toast. You can see where we had our blowout right here. I don't see any cracks in the head, so that's good news. But let me show you these manifolds here. Okay, maybe somebody out there can help me understand what's going on here. Now, I did some research on this intake manifold, and this is an older style propane intake manifold. People would use them on gasoline tractors intentionally because they're supposed to be higher performance. But I don't think these are supposed to be 2-piece. Look at this. On every corner, the ears are broken off. And the exhaust manifold as well. 2 on this corner and just one on this corner. So when you put it together, you know, it kind of lines up, but I just don't know what's going on here. Is this something that was one piece at one time and then has cracked over the years? It just seems unlikely to me that it would crack so perfectly on all four corners, you know what I mean? It almost looks like it was done intentionally. Like maybe this was part of a gasoline manifold and they adapted this to make it fit with it, you know what I mean? Maybe they broke the ears off intentionally. Could that be possible? I don't know, but what I do know is that we're not going to run this manifold setup anymore. I just don't see how we can get even pressure with the manifolds against the side of the head the way it's cracked like this. I think this old propane intake manifold is actually somewhat desirable, but I don't think anybody would want this one with the ears broken off on it like that. So both of these may be destined for the garbage, but if anybody wants this, just let me know. So over here, we got a brand new manifold that we're going to install and run, and you can see how completely different it is from this guy. And if we come and look at this one right here more closely, you can see that it's factory split right there and factory split right there, but not there. And of course on the corners they're not either. And it's got a completely different design here versus this one. This one is all incorporated with the intake manifold. A lot of times they do that to act as kind of a preheater for the air fuel mix. If you think you might be going to reuse your old manifold, take a straight edge to the ports and just make sure that it hasn't warped. Like I can see daylight through this one here, and that is exactly where we were getting that exhaust leak, that black stuff that we saw. So that explains what was happening there. So the only thing left now is to remove the rocker arm assembly and the push rods and then start taking the head off. All right, I've got the motor set at the firing position on number 1. That's where we're going to leave it. So when we get the head back, we'll be able to just burn through the valve adjustment fairly quickly. Just have to take this bracket off here, but I'm going to start cracking these head nuts loose. They are 7/8. Now I just want to get a good look of the assembly before I remove it, just in case I forget what goes where. Let's check the other side. All right, now let's get the push rods removed. After I get these clean, I like to roll them on a flat surface to see if there's any warp to them at all. If there is, they need to be replaced. If they're still straight, then we can reuse them. I think if everything's in good condition, it doesn't matter a whole lot, but if things are worn, then in my opinion, you should keep the push rods in the same position that they came out of. So because this is all an unknown so far, we don't know what the cam looks like or anything, I'm gonna keep track of which hole the push rods came out of. I can't wait to see this head gasket. The little fitting up in front here was interfering, so I got that removed. Let's try this again. Now this one little bolt is interfering, so I'll get that removed. Now this upright radiator thing is interfering with it coming straight off, so I'll have to take this off after all, at least part way. All right, the fifth attempt coming up here is going to be the one. I can feel it. I've got straps on instead of chains. I removed the studs for the valve cover, and I think we're going to be able to get it up and clear of the studs. Well, I think we may have found the smoking gun. If you remember from the last video, I pointed out that we had some leakage right here along the gasket, exterior leakage that we could see, and also some over here. Well, look at the gasket in these areas. Let's go around the other side. This side was also leaking, if you remember from the last video, around here. And look at the gasket in that area. I haven't touched this, so I didn't wipe it off or anything. That's the way it is. For anybody who doesn't know, these big holes here are where the push rods go, and those holes go right into the crankcase. So if we did have a gasket failure here, like I think we did, that coolant would have been going right into the bottom of the oil pan, right down into the crankcase. Also from the previous video, I stuck a endoscope camera down through the spark plug holes, and we saw this. We saw carbon buildup on the valves. We saw some streaking on the cylinders, and we saw some ring ridges, just like I'm seeing now. But the cylinders don't look damaged. They just look a little bit glazed over. So let's see if we can get this gasket off and get a look at the underneath side as well. So here I've got the head gasket up on the bench so we can get a better look at it. Now, I wouldn't consider myself an expert at reading head gaskets, but this one is pretty obvious. Again, it was leaking externally here, here, and here, and it corresponds with these clean spots on the gasket. And coming around here to the front, it was leaking pretty much all across the front like I showed you in that previous video, and it corresponds to the clean spots on the gasket here. Now these holes here, not the round ones or the triangle ones, but the ones in between, these are where the push rods go down into the crankcase, okay? So you can see here that pretty much all of the clean spots encompass the push rod holes. And this would account for all of that coolant we were getting down in the bottom of the crankcase in the oil pan. Now let's move on to this black stuff here. So this is carbon buildup, okay? So carbon deposits are a result of detonation, and detonation occurs within the combustion chamber, and the combustion chamber only, ideally. But because we got a lot of carbon buildup in between the cylinders, in between the combustion chambers, so any byproduct of the detonation within the cylinders should not be coming out sideways onto the gasket here. So that's telling me that this gasket was not doing its job in this regard either. And you can see how much is built up on here. I hadn't even gotten down to the gasket yet, and I've been scraping on this a while. So even though we checked the compression on the tractor and it was okay, we were losing some compression based on what I see here on this gasket in between the cylinders. Now if we turn the gasket on its end here and look at the corner, you can also see that it is delaminating here. So I guess in summary about the gasket here, when you say I have a blown head gasket, you know, quote, blown head gasket, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have a piece missing on the head gasket somewhere. There's like a chunk missing. This is a blown head gasket also. It's just a general term for a head gasket that ain't working anymore. Okay, so enough about this. Let me go show you the top of the engine block. All right, so first of all, we're going to talk about the carbon that we were noticing on the head gasket. Well, we have the exact same thing occurring here. Obviously, I'll get all this cleaned up before we put it back together, but I am not going to put rings on it at this time because I don't think it needs it. And when you get this much carbon built up outside of the combustion chamber, this stuff gets underneath the head gasket, and over time it will slowly cause the head gasket to lift. And whenever the head gasket starts to lift, then you get compression loss, you get carbon outside the combustion chambers, and you get coolant leaks. Now if we come over here and take a look at the mating surface of the cylinder head, we're going to see the same kind of stuff that we saw on the top of the block. We're going to see some carbon deposits and some residue from the coolant system around the water jacket ports, which is good news because it could have been something much worse. Now I've already dropped off the cylinder head at a local machine shop and they're currently working on it. It should be done, you know, maybe a week from now or something. So he calls me back a week later, and the first thing he said to me on the phone was, your head doesn't just have one crack, it has several cracks in it. I think I might have used a little profanity right after that, and before I could finish what I was saying, he said, but all these cracks happened a very long time ago, and all these cracks were fixed properly. So I proceeded to ask him how they fixed it, because I'm curious. And he said, well, they pinned it. And if you guys don't know what pinning a crack in a head or a block means, simply put, you're drilling a bunch of holes along the crack, probably starting with one on each end, and then using a drill a bunch of more holes in succession along the entire crack. And you wouldn't be doing this with a hand drill, you'd be doing it like with a mill or something more precise. He said, then you put pins in all those holes, and then after that, I think they go back and weld over the top of all the pins. So yeah, he said, your head's got several cracks in it, but they've all been pinned. All the repairs are holding 100%. He said, I think you're good to go. So what sounded like really bad news at first turned into good news. And I said, so what about the valves? And he said, well, all the valve guides are literally perfect. There's no play in the valve guides whatsoever. And he said, I think 2 or 3 of the valves themselves need to be replaced, but the rest of them are just fine, and he can proceed with the valve job and get that all done. Probably put new springs on there, he said. And then he's going to deck the mating surface and we'll be good to go. I should have the head back within 1 week, certainly 2 weeks, and then begin the process of putting the whole thing back together. And I think this thing's going to run better than it has in 30 years. And while we're waiting for the head to come back, we can focus on some of the other projects around here. I always like to have several things going at once so I don't get bored with the one project and you guys don't get bored with the one project. And don't forget to check out antiquecarsandstuff.com. That's our online store. Anything that you purchase in there, the proceeds will go directly to help buy parts and new projects and fund the channel. So I appreciate any support there. And even if you don't go to the store and buy anything, just give the video a like. Anyway, I'll say so long for now and hope to see everybody on the next video.